Okay, yeah, and so I just remember a few things of when I was growing up, but about October trick or treating, ghosts, scary stories, scary encounters. But I'm gonna go a little bit into details of what I remember, like the conversations, the events in my life that happened. I just know that when I was growing up, my mom and me had lived in a city here in Texas called Pharr, Pharr, PO Box 78577. And we used to use the phone a lot when we were growing up. And I would always use the star 67 code and the chat line and everything on the phone. And I just know that my grandmother was very strict, very clean, and very like different than other parents that people had. And my mom was very caring and very friendly with me, and we had no problems. The only problem we had was my dad. And I always had this problem, but it didn't happen very often, where I would kind of like not collapse, but like kind of like pass out and then wake up. And I kind of caught on to something, and I realized that I wasn't fully conscious at some point in my life, and that this had happened several times, and that I didn't even remember or acknowledge that I had passed out. And I caught a person who was taking advantage of me sexually, and I didn't want to give trust to anybody. I don't know if the person did it to help, or if the person was doing it to cause trouble to me. And so anyway, it caused trouble to me because my mom found out, and I kind of gave her the news about that the wrong way. I should have talked about that to her, but I didn't know how to tell her. That's why, because I couldn't tell her. Like, I didn't know how to tell her, and I wasn't fully sure. So I kind of got the person caught hands on in front of my mom, so she could acknowledge that the person had been doing that for a long time, which is why the person didn't want to be with us in the family or with friends, right? And so nobody wants to be taken advantage of sexually or physically or emotionally or in any way. So I think I did good in telling her about that. And so we were at my grandma's one time, and this has nothing to do with molestations or sexual um advantages or anything like that. This has to do with the month of October, with trick or treating, haunted houses, and stuff like that. I just know that my grandparents, like, not because of October, but because of October, it is that I remember. They would sit outside of my grandma and my grandpa's house, right? And my mom, my uncle, my aunt, and me would go outside with them. And sometimes my grandma's friends would come over, like old folks, like people that were like 70, 60, 80 years old. And I was barely like 5, 7, 8 years old. I was barely growing up. And I just know we would sit outside, and my grandma would order like Funyun rings, but the ones that they bake in the oil, the not the chips, the like the ones that you bake on a pan with oil, the real onion, and you dip them on eggnog and flour, and then you dip them in the oil, and it becomes crispy. Those. And my grandma would tell us stories, like she would share stories with us. But the reason we would start talking about stuff like that was because my mom's like, I would be so they were saying, the adults were telling the older people, like my grandparents, because my grandparents would have visitors, and they would say, I know it would be so scary for that to happen. That's why sometimes I just go inside my house, I lock the door, and I don't tell anybody anything about who's in the house and who's not in the house, because I would be scared for them to know that I'm by myself sometimes, or that I'm by myself with my kids. And it's because there were several occasions where the door would just close on its own. So my grandpa made a wooden a wooden door extra for the back patio. Like he had two doors, I think. And he in the day he would open the first door and leave the one that was made out of wood locked. And I don't remember how the door was, but it was just a weird door, like one of those doors that you open and then you open the second one, like that, like the ones we have here. But the ones that my grandpa had were made by hand by him. They were made out of wood, and it had like a little window, like it was just weird. And sometimes the wind would it's because the house was made out of wood. So the wind would blow like the door, and the door would often open and close without it closing completely. And so one day everybody was there, and we heard knocking on the door, right? But there was nobody inside the house. And we were like, hello, who's there? Hello. And there was nobody. And it was weird and strange because we had two windows in the house, a very big window in the front and a very big window on the side where the door was at. So if someone would knock, we would right away see the person because of the window. The driveway was like very obvious. Like if someone, let's say that someone would go to the door, right, and knock, and we would not find a person, we would know if the person left or stayed in the house or in the area that very few minutes or seconds that it happened. And there was nobody there. We had two huge windows, one in the front, like connected to the door, and the other one on the side. Like, this is my grandma's house, right? And the door was like that, like in the corner. So the door was kind of attached to the two windows, and the only way that you would go in or out of the property is if you walk into the driveway, go up the stairs, and knock the door. And if the person wouldn't have walked back forward through the driveway, the person would have gone through the side or the other side. But we would have been able to see because the other side was very far away, like from the door. So we would have seen if the person would have walked to that side or towards the other side. And we were right there, right in front of the door. And we clearly heard like that. My grandma one time, she ran. She threw herself in the restroom and everybody got fucking scared. And we didn't know because it felt like a cold hand, like a haunted cold hand knocking the door. And this happened in far. And I remember my grandma, if a little hurricane or a little rain would come in, she would close the doors, put lots of wood around the doors and the windows. She will be praying, crying, throwing herself in the bathroom. She would be very scared, man, my grandma. And so we had this thing in the family, because we come from a very good family. But my grandma started having problems because of my aunt. And that's why I didn't want to get back together with any of my ex-boyfriends, because I just thought it wasn't worth losing all of that for a relationship. So I said, nah, it's better if I stay single, because maybe that'll bring back old times, like when my uncle sits outside with us, my aunt, my mom, my mom's sister, and all that stuff. That's better than being with a person having sex all the time. And then so like we were there, right? And my grandma and me were like, I think it was just me and my mom, or me and my grandma, or me and my cousin. It was just like two people. And we clearly heard like that. And like when we were there, we're like, what the fuck? Like, who is it? If it was somebody there, we would have seen the person walk through the side of the garden where the door is at, or walk to the other side of the garden, or at least walk away through the driveway. And there was nobody. So one time we also heard like somebody grab the doorknob and do this. Look, watch. like that, like this. Watch, like that, and we were like, "What the fuck?" We got scared.